The following is a Papi Chulo Radio original program. The views and opinions expressed in the commentaries and/or interviews in the following program are solely those of the individuals and are not views of Papi Chulo Radio, its parent, affiliate, or subsidiary companies.
The Avengers Initiative, WandaVision.
Welcome to the Avengers Initiative, WandaVision, a PapiChuloRadio.com original series. Papi Chulo Radio celebrating a decade of podcasting excellence. Today is Monday, January 25th, 2021, and I'm your host, Jeffrey Aruz. During this podcast, we'll be having an in-depth discussion on Disney Plus's WandaVision. Please welcome my co-hosts, Professor X.
Hello, everyone.
And Priscilla Rocha.
I don't have any lullabies for you guys, but hello, everybody.
Oh, wouldn't that have been nice, though?
Yeah, it's a Covian lullaby to...
Those are always end in tragedy. So, before I get into the whole synopsis stuff, I do want to go over just some tiny odds and ends from the first two episodes, because, as people are rewatching the episodes, at least I did. I don't know if the rest of you did. People are noticing different little things. And I just wanted to mention them before we actually start talking about this actual episode, episode 3. So apparently in episode 1, something that we missed was during that commercial that was where it was the Stark toaster. So I don't know if everyone just remembers the toaster, how it looks, but there were like 3 squiggly little lines over. They were like little loopy lines on the toaster. Apparently, if you flip those over, those little loops turn into 666. So there's that. I
would remind you the incredible depth I went into for that particular commercial.
I know.
Even I missed that.
You missed the 666. I do have a little thing that I'm going to be talking to you about, Professor, that might blow your mind, or you're going to laugh. But I'm going to save that until the end. So the second thing that was noticed that we didn't notice either, and I'm disappointed in all of us, was in the second episode. So as the characters walked into the kitchen, there's a wall. And on the wall, there's a mural. And the mural is of that building, the prison in which Hydra was housing Wanda and Pietro. That building on the hill, that compound on the hill, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I saw that online.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was
I saw it online as well, but I didn't think it was,
I didn't think it was a big thing to point that out, so I was just kind of like, oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I had not noticed it, so the internet enlightened me, and I was like, okay. And 2 other little things as well. The episodes, when I was reading the synopses in the previous 2 podcasts, they were just called episode 1, episode 2. Disney Plus has started releasing the actual episode titles. So I'll be reading episode 3's title in a moment. But to go back, episode 1 is officially called Filmed Before a Live Studio Audience, and episode 2 is officially called Don't Touch That Dial. So all of the episodes are getting, in essence, a TV style, TV lingo style episode title, which is appropriate because it's, it's an homage to classic sitcoms. It's called WandaVision, which sounds like television and that sort of thing. And the other thing
apparently... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Professor.
Oh, I was just going to say, a really weird thing about that was that the first episode was done in front of a live studio audience like they would have done back in the 50s.
Yes.
And apparently they actually dressed up the studio audience in 1950s appropriate garb.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, apparently, yes. And, we didn't see them at all. There was no cutaways to the audience. Now, maybe they were filming something that will play out in a future episode. I can't imagine Marvel did this for no reason whatever. But yeah, I just heard today that apparently the actual studio audience was dressed up in 50s suitable garb. And I have to think Marvel is planning on doing something with this going forward.
Okay, that's a scoop right there. Very interesting to know. And
well, after you mocked us for not, talking about posters on the wall, I felt, well, I better get this in there for the sake of completeness.
Okay, I like that. But speaking of mocking, all right, Professor. So after we recorded the podcast, I legitimately went and rewatched both of the episodes because you had done your 30-second breakdown of the commercial. And
my crazed red yarn on the wall level of analysis, which yes. I still think holds up.
Yes, and I believe in a lot of it. But the one thing that I had to see, because it was the running gag of the cock and the balls.
Yes. And yes. Did you see it? Yes.
Okay, I saw something, but then I stared at it, and then I realized what it was. And are you ready for your mind to be blown?
Fire away.
That was, I mean, it is phallic in nature, but that was not that. That was a lobster.
I'm not saying it was an actual cock and balls. I'm saying that on the wall, underneath a rooster, it looked like a cock and balls.
Okay, well, it was a running gag, so I wasn't sure if
yes, well, at that point, though, we hadn't had the lobster, so it became a running gag from that point.
Okay,
I still think it's really interesting that I think it's much more amusing though the rooster and stuff was. I find it really interesting that when they started out and when they panned across, the background faded out. I can't help but think that's going to be significant in some way. I don't know how.
Yes, I don't disagree with you on that. Yeah, but it was...
and you can't deny there was a rooster on the wall.
There was a rooster on the wall.
And the clocks were different times. Am I crazy?
No, that was all correct. Yes, no, but it was a lobster. So in essence, it was foreshadowing the lobster from later on, which I thought was neat nonetheless. All right, so... Did anyone else have any odds and ends from the first two episodes? Anything that they noticed upon a rewatch or anything like that we didn't discuss before we head into the actual current episode?
There was something, but I want to mention it organically when we're talking about this episode, so I'll leave it.
Okay, perfect. Well, then let's jump into our discussion of Season 1, Episode 3, which was titled Now in Color, and debuted January 22nd, 2021 via Disney+. Here's the official synopsis of the episode. Wanda's pregnancy fritzes her powers as she and Vision prepare for an accelerated delivery. So I'm going to start off by asking a question that I've asked throughout all these podcasts so far. So the episode takes place, in essence, in the 70s. It's an homage to 70s television shows, in particular sitcoms. Clearly this one was probably, I think we can all say each of these homages has been inspired by a particular television show. The first one was a little bit more Dick Van Dyke-y. The second one was a little bit more Bewitched, although in essence, I think the entire series, when it's focusing on the TV stuff, it is heavily influenced by Bewitched, and that's because of the magic and the powers and that sort of thing. This one, I guess, leaned into the Brady Bunch, sort of. That type of 70s genre.
But the beginning of the song sounded like the Partridge Family.
I was gonna say that as well. It's sort of Partridge Brady's-ish, because even like even though the song was very Partridge Family, the visuals was kind of Brady's as well, with the different boxes. Although that's also very 70s as well. So it was an overall 70s motif for this episode. So are we fans of 70s sitcoms in particular? I'll open it up to the floor.
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I agree. I never watched 70s sitcoms. So
Oh, that's
for
interesting.
me, I'm aware of what they mean. I can sort of, appreciate that. But it's funny, like when, when they're talking about that, I don't think I've ever watched an episode of Gilligan's Island or Brady Bunch or any of those shows.
You've never seen Mary Tyler Moore?
No, Mary Tyler Moore. Mary Tyler Moore. Not only have I watched, but have been rewatching, and boy, that's a show that holds up. If only because Mary Tyler Moore. Yow.
Correct, but that's 70s, so that one counts.
It is technically 70s, and as is All in the Family. But I didn't really watch shows like that when I was younger. So unless I'm going to go and seek those shows out now, like I've watched all the episodes of MASH, I've watched all the episodes of Mary Tyler Moore, but I've probably never watched more than 3 or 4 episodes of All in the Family. As I say, I've never watched an episode of Gilligan's Island or the Brady Bunch. So for me, it's not like I know these shows themselves. I think I get the cultural references. So when you're looking at the set for WandaVision in this episode, I realized that it was a callback to the Brady Bunch, even though I've never seen that show. In the same way that, I've never seen E.T., but I get those references.
You've never seen E.T.?
I've also never seen Titanic or Avatar, but I get the references.
You've never seen Titanic?
No, I know how it ends.
Your voice is just gonna keep going higher and
I know,
higher.
right? I mean,
Exactly.
Avatar, I
More
haven't
about
seen
itself.
Avatar, so
Yeah,
that's fine.
apparently, unless James Cameron pulled a real surprise, I know how Titanic ends.
Yes, yeah. That's fascinating. Titanic was such a cultural phenomenon, though.
I know, but it was one of those things that there are things that, I just missed, at various times when I was going to school and stuff like that. It's like Friends. I never watched Friends all the way through because it was during a period of time when I didn't have a television. So, I would have to go back and watch from the beginning to get it.
Okay, all right. So I
Having
guess
said that, when WandaVision makes it to the aughts, I'm pretty sure they'll be doing the Friends as their theme.
yeah, I do. No, yeah, I do wonder. I am curious to see, are they going to do the aughts in general, or will Friends be more so the 90s? Because Friends started
Yeah,
in
good
the
point.
90s. Yeah, because I think
I would love to see them doing like sort of a Seinfeld themed, but it'll be interesting, we're sort of getting ahead of ourselves, but do they have to stick to the sitcom format? Could they do sort of a Magnum PI type show in the 80s or something like that rather than having to stick to sitcoms? I don't know.
yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see. As far as myself with 70s sitcoms, so I kind of classify 70s sitcoms in 2 different ways. There's like the family-friendly sitcoms, things that would be like The Brady Bunch, Partridge Family. I'd probably even throw in Gilligan's Island in there. And then there are the more adult-skewed 70s sitcoms, things like Mary Tyler Moore, Bob Newhart Show, Jeffersons, etc. I've seen, and I've been much more of a fan of like the adult skewed shows. Like I loved Mary Tyler Moore, Rhoda, the actual spin-off series. The ones that I mentioned are the ones that I've watched and really enjoyed. I've probably only seen maybe a handful or even less of the Brady Bunch in its entirety. Because it's a little bit more corny and cheesy, and I've just never gravitated to that when it came to classic sitcoms, and I don't think I've ever seen an episode of The Partridge Family. Maybe one, if that. So, and this one definitely leaned into that sort of cheesy 70s family situation comedy type of thing, which I did get all the references, and I have seen the Brady Bunch movie, like that one, and I think it was called A Very Brady Sequel. Like I've seen those, the movies that sort of spoofed the television series, but I was never really a fan of the actual Brady Bunch, period. All right.
Nick gasp.
I know. Wait, did you like the Brady Bunch?
Yeah, I did like the Brady Bunch.
Okay.
When I was a kid, like my dad used to put on like Nick and Night and stuff like that, and he used to watch a ton of Brady Bunch and like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie and stuff, like everything that was on at the time. That's what I
Yeah.
watched.
See, the Brady Bunch
And
night was
so,
when I was not watching Nick and Night.
yeah, I was watching Brady Bunch. But Yeah, I've watched Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family, and so I got the references that was coming from that. But I maybe it's the fact that I come from like this time frame, but I get the feeling that every guy kind of looks like a pervert in the 70s or something. Because Vision just looked like he came from a lineup or something. I don't know. He looks like one of those weird My Favorite Murder type of people. I don't know.
To be fair,
That's
all
funny.
men were perverts until, well, yeah, never mind.
That's even funnier. That's hilarious. Speaking of looks, I feel like I say this every time, but just props to the set designers, the costumers, the prop people. I mean, like every week, everything is just so spot on. Like, man, did they study the era in which each episode covers, because as you referenced, Professor, like the set was very Brady's. It was beautifully Brady's. I mean, they just did a phenomenal job, and the costumes and the hairstyles and everything was just incredible. I read an interview with Deborah Jo Rupp, who plays Mrs. Hart, and she was saying, like, when she would be on the sets, she like remembered, he was like, oh my god, that was the TV back then, or that was this from back then. Like, she was really impressed at the attention to detail. And she also commented on the fact that a lot of the actors actually went to sitcoms school. You know, they did, you know, maybe, I don't know how long it went, you know, maybe a couple of sessions where the actors were taught how to act sitcom. And she was like, I was able to skip that because I've been in so many sitcoms. But the attention to detail, you know, from BTS to what we see on camera is pretty damn spectacular. And I feel like we all sort of co-sign that. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the opening theme. As incredibly cheesy and kitschy as it was, I mean, they had to actually film them doing all of that cheesy 70s stuff, you know, just smiling and eating ice cream cones and running into your friends on the street and that kind of stuff. What did we think of this Partridge Family infused, Brady-esque looking theme song, Professor?
Oh, it was totally great. I mean, you know, even if you haven't watched the actual shows, you understand. And you know, they're not mocking it; it's an homage. And you were saying that you know, the level of detail and the level of love, basically, that they're doing. These are, you know, the people who are creating this show are people who grew up on television, grew up on the shows of the '70s. Maybe not watching them, probably not watching them at the time, but you know, watching them, as Priscilla was saying, on Nick at Night. So you know, they have an obvious love for the form, and I think that's coming through. I think it's as if, you know, they were to come to us and say, hey, we want you to create a loving pastiche of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, what we would do with that. So I think this is something, it's familiar, it's comforting. And I think that's a key point, you know, that we'll talk about when we're talking about, you know, what is going on in the reality of the show as opposed to the show. But no, I thought it was great, you know, seeing that that opening montage. As much as I love the Bewitched montage, I thought that was great. You know, the people who are doing the theme songs for every episode are phenomenal. You know, I think I mentioned last time that it's the husband and wife team who did Frozen, and they are just absolutely nailing the tone, the sound of it. Visually, you know, something that we saw, you know, in the previous episodes, I think they're repeating in this episode even more strongly, is the hexagon motif, which we might want to talk about later. But it was very, very strong in the opening there. But no, it was just it really did feel like, you know, the start of a standard cheesy 70s TV show, which is exactly what they wanted to do.
Yeah. The Hexa is not gone. The Hexa is here, apparently, and here to stay, because there was so much of that in this episode. Yeah.
And by the way, hexagon, what is the Scarlet Witch's power? She casts hexes. Hexagon? Oh, wow. How interesting is that?
I knew you were going to bring that up. The hex is the sides, the 6 sides. I knew it.
I like it. I like it. Something that I didn't really notice it, and I've seen this episode a couple of times, and I've tried to freeze frame to see it, but some people say that there's an interesting silhouette on the pregnancy book that Vision has in the theme song, opening credits section. Some people say it looks like a Marvel villain. I didn't really see it, so I don't know if either of you saw anything in the opening themes that gave a hint or clue to anything this time around. I didn't this time around, though.
Yeah, I didn't see
What
anything like
villain?
that. So I think it's Rishi.
Yeah, I didn't see. What villain are you talking about?
Mephisto, however you pronounce it.
Oh, I did not see that. But again, in the previous episode, people said that they thought they saw the Grim Reaper in the anime background. I didn't see that either. So,
Well, there's that. Okay, well, we'll talk about the pregnancy because that was like the big thing in a moment. I want to actually talk about the glitch. So Vision is out talking to Herb. Apparently Herb is the neighbor. And he technically glitches, if we're going to talk about glitches, because he's trimming the hedges, and then he's all of a sudden trimming the wall, the fence, the stone, I guess, fence that separates his home from the Vision's home. I don't know if they have a last name, but we'll call them the Visions. Yeah, and when he's told by Vision, like, hey, you kind of, you're trimming too much, he continues on in almost like a trance-like state. So there was that. So Vision enters the house and basically tells Wanda, like, hey, there's something strange going on. Like, I feel like there's something going on here. This thing with Herb, the thing with the hearts, and Wanda's listening. We see her eyes sort of move, and then our screen glitches. It wasn't like a rewind that we saw in episode 2. This was like a cut, like a hard cut, and it rewinds back, and the scene takes a different turn, and Vision clearly no longer is following the breadcrumbs of weirdness that's going on in Westview. I will say, as I was watching this the first time, I don't know why, because this is being streamed, so it's not like it's on DVD or anything. But for a moment, I was like, did my, screen glitch? Like, I was like, what the hell happened? And then I realized that, no, this was clearly, obviously, intentional. Priscilla, what did you think of this? And, yeah, what did you think of this? I don't even know if I want to lead you down a particular path. So what did you just think of this in general?
The first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, she Wanda messed with him. Like I immediately blamed it on her. Like I didn't even think I didn't think it was a mistake in the film. I didn't think it was anything. I looked for reasons to blame Wanda, and my boyfriend had missed it, so he thought that it was a glitch in Disney or something. So he's like, no, wait, let's rewind it because I missed it. I don't know what's going on. So we rewound it, and I was looking for proof that she maybe twitched her hand or maybe wiggled her nose or something to show that she had done it. But there's nothing. It just, the scene just changes. So I'm not so certain that she's the one that's doing this. I'm thinking that someone else is playing the scene here.
Oh, that's interesting. She was clearly responsible the first time in at the tail end of episode 2. She was responsible then. I was looking at her face throughout the entire time. Like when I rewatched it, like I was staring at her face because I was like, did she do something? And she does sort of, look, her eyes, it's not twitch, but like she moves her eyes back and forth as she's looking at Vision, and I was like, is that when she did it? And I want to put the blame on her, but now that you said what you said, Priscilla, I don't know if I can fully put the blame on her for this. Professor, Your thoughts on the glitch?
Yeah, I think if this had been the first time it happened in the series, we wouldn't know for sure. But because we saw her do it in the previous episode, where she literally rewound the tape to the point where she wanted things to play back from, having her do it this time, in the very next episode in the show, I think makes it clear that this was her doing this. Now they didn't telegraph it. They didn't have Elizabeth Olsen, wiggling her nose or anything like that. But to me, it felt like very clear that she was doing the same thing again. But I thought it was so much more effective this time because you did have those sort of, clumsy edits back in shows at that time where they had to, just go back and make a physical cut in the tape. And having it happen like that, I thought really, really worked well because the first time it happened, a bit like you were saying, like what just happened? Was this, a glitch? Was this, but no, they were, creating essentially a glitch, the sort of thing you would see on a 70s TV show that everyone would have accepted at the time. But, by our conventional editing standards, feels kind of clumsy. But, for me, in watching it in the moment, I thought to myself, oh, that's the Scarlet Witch doing this again because we've seen her do it before. It's just that now, because we're in the 70s, it's not rewinding and replaying. She's just basically making a hard edit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I like it. We didn't even touch Herb. So what the hell was that? Because I read an interesting interpretation of that online, but I want to hear what both of you have to say about this first. Professor?
Well, it kind of gets into, as we see the outside characters, aside from Geraldine and the Doctor, played far less of a role in this episode than in the previous episode. This episode was much more about, Vision and the Scarlet Witch. My feeling is that, when the characters are, okay, I'm just going to jump ahead. My feeling is that, Hub and Agnes and Dottie and the others are the people who were living in this community before the Scarlet Witch moved in and took it over. So, at times when the Scarlet Witch isn't actively controlling them, I think we see in this episode as we go into later in the episode that when she's not actively controlling them, there's, a sense of awareness that they have that things are not right. And I think they were sort of, suggesting that when Hub was, using his hedge trimmer to cut into the cinder blocks and kept cutting. I think that, when they're not actively being controlled, they're sort of like non-player characters, but non-player characters who, depending on how much attention the Scarlet Witch is paying to them, I think they have perhaps a little more agency and a little more awareness than they would have otherwise. And that's one of the things I think was really interesting about this episode. Prior to this episode, whenever we saw the outside characters, they were all just, characters in the sitcom. This is the episode where they seem to be breaking free of that. Maybe not breaking free entirely, but, the sense of unawareness, a feeling that they're doing stuff at the same time. So, not to cut ahead to the end, but I think this was the episode where, the show lays its cards on the table and tells you what is going to be the reality going forward. And I think that, Hub doing that and the later episode with him and Catherine Hahn really plays that, makes that point clear. Previously, we talked about, what was going on in this episode. Who was manipulating, who was, the reality of it. And I personally feel that this episode makes it very clear what is going to be the reality going forward. I don't want to talk too much about it now because I'm sure we'll get to it later, but I think that was a good foreshadow of that. When you see someone, using a hedge trimmer to cut through cinder blocks, that's obviously really, really weird. So for that to be happening, it sort of plays up the weirdness. And the fact that Hub wasn't aware of that, I think, they used that scene just to set up what was going to happen later. And I think in retrospect, when you see the scene, as I say, with Hub and Agnes later in the episode, it makes a lot more sense. And I did like one thing about that was that, the cutting into it, later in the episode, when you see that same wall, the cutting is still there. So it's not like the reality of that was undone. It feels to me that in this episode, what is actually happening was made clear, and they set it up in that scene. But I think it was important to set that up, with Hub sort of, and also the way that he was doing it was, the very distracted way that he was looking as he was doing it, and wasn't even aware that he was cutting into that. It's like he was, an NPC in a computer game or something like that, just doing something off on the side of the screen, and wasn't even aware of that. But I think by the end of the episode, we understand why that happened.
Okay. That's interesting. Also, what's interesting is the fact that you called Herb Hub like 10 times.
Well, and again, this may be Paul Bettany's accent. When he called him Herb, it sounded to me like Hub. So it sounded to me like that was the character's name.
Hub. Yeah, well, it's the British accent, yeah. Priscilla, what about you? Is your... what did you think? Are you also try not to go too deep in as the professor did? Because I will be asking specifically about that conversation, because I thought that conversation with Agnes was quite fascinating. But at the time when you just watched this opening scene, like, what did you think was going on?
Where he's trimming the hedges and he goes straight into the cinder block?
Yeah.
During the conversation with Agnes.
No, we're not. We haven't touched that conversation yet.
Okay, so just the cinder block.
Yes, just the cinder blocks.
Just the cinder block? It made me feel like when you have your Sims characters and you're not really controlling them, and they like go into the fire and stuff like that, and or they go into like the swimming pool and drown themselves and stuff like that.
Oh my god. The Sims sounds dramatic.
That's what's going on with these characters. Like, she's not controlling her characters, her little puppets anymore. So they're kind of going like wildly out of sync, and they're like doing random shit now distractedly, and it's getting to the point where they're kind of destroying property.
Okay.
I think that's it. Because I feel like Wanda's controlling all of this, like, world, all of this universe, all this span.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
I feel like the pregnancy, like, just took a lot out of her, and she just can't concentrate at the moment.
Okay. I believe in that as well. I mean, in this episode, she loses control of her powers, and I think because of the pregnancy, she did lose some of the control she had of this idyllic sitcom-y world that she is presiding over. I read this interpretation online, and I liked it. And based off of what happens later, I think this is probably the best interpretation of what happened in this moment with Herb. What I read online in like the comment section, which can be interesting at times, someone interpreted that scene as Herb, in essence, trying to break free from the spell, the illusion of the sitcom world. In essence, he was literally like cutting himself out of the illusion. And maybe that's why he had a little bit more awareness later on in the episode. We'll be talking about his discussion with Agnes a little bit later. But I was like, you know what? That's an interesting interpretation of that. And I kind of dug it.
I kind of prefer Priscilla's interpretation that it's like a sim, just doing their thing off on the side of the screen. It's not the focus of attention, so they can, drown themselves in a pool or whatever. So for me, I think it's more likely that it was just, an NPC off in the corner of the screen doing his own thing. than him trying to escape. But I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that either. Everything was going wrong in essence with her magic. So her losing her powers of control over the denizens of Westview could have been what was going on as well. So let's talk about the pregnancy. So we start off with Dr. Nielsen, which I wondered if the last name Nielsen was a little wink to the Nielsen rating system. If it was, that was brilliant. I feel like everything on the show is so meticulously detailed that probably was why they called him Dr. Nielsen. He's there. He's telling her that she's about 4 months along. When he leaves, Vision does the calculations of like how, at the rate that she's showing and that sort of thing, that the baby should be there in like 3 days. But her belly keeps on getting bigger. And they do so much in this episode of playing around, classic sitcom tropes, especially pregnancy tropes. Like at one point, she's holding up a bowl of fruit. And then later on, she holds flowers, a vase of flowers. I thought they were going to have her cover her belly up with pillows and with like a giant purse. I mean, they do the whole coat thing as well, which is kind of a wink and a nod to when actors are actually pregnant and they have to hide her pregnancy and that sort of thing. And they do put her in, big coats and jackets and sweaters and that kind of stuff. I mean, there's... On Home Improvement, I remember Patricia Richardson, like they just, filmed her with like giant purses, and they did on Seinfeld, they kept on putting Elaine in like these giant coats and that sort of thing. And, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. You know what I'm saying? What did we think of some of the sort of pregnancy tropes that we saw, especially in the 70s when they could actually say the word pregnant on the television and that sort of thing, as well as the comedic sitcom-y type of things that they did to try to have her hide her pregnancy from like Geraldine and etc. Priscilla?
I thought that was really cute and like really like I thought it worked well with how it kind of worked well with like how they do that with women in that era when they were pregnant, but they were still working on shows and they had to put on the jackets or put on like or magically get in front of a couch or something like that to like avoid the pregnant belly showing on TV or something like that. Like the magic of TV back then, how like we still had that going on even to Frasier to this day. So like I thought that was just like a cute nod to TV goings on, TV happenings to this day. But the stork itself, that was funny as hell. I loved how she kept trying to hex it away, and it's like, nope, I'm more powerful than you are. I'm gonna stay here, and I want those fish pants, and I want to be in the baby's room, and I'm gonna do what I want, and you're not gonna do anything to stop me, because I'm a stork.
Yes, that was very bewitched. That was a very bewitched type of thing. Which was incredibly comedic and so much fun to watch just visually because of everything that they did when she would like magic it away and it would be, there would be that poof of smoke and like it was supposed to disappear and it was like, nope, nope, nope. I thought that was brilliant. My question is, was it that her magic was fritzing or was one of the babies doing some of that?
It's one of the babies. It's one of the babies for sure.
Okay. Because there was a lot of magic in this episode. There was a storm in the house. And, when she was giving birth, the electricity would fritz and the power would be going out across town. There was a lot going on with her magic, and it was visually expressed in the show a lot leading up to the birth. And I wondered, was it just that her powers were fritzing, or could the children have had something to do with that? Because if I'm not mistaken, one of them has super speed, but the other one actually has her magical abilities in the comics. So could it have
I
been?
was about to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, isn't one of them like a hexer just like she is?
Yeah. Professor, what about you? I want to get your take on that.
Well, I don't think we had any indication in the episode that it was, the baby's exerting control. But yes, in the comic, she has two children, Tommy and William, who got their name shout outs in the episode. Some people were calling it an Easter egg. It's not an Easter egg; it's an egg. An Easter egg has to be hidden. But yes, one of her children becomes the young Avenger known as Wiccan, who has magical powers. And so it could be that. I don't think so. I think that's maybe reading a bit too much. I think,
Okay.
given that this was a sitcom trope, I think it's just that, in a sitcom, things happen because they're funny, not because they necessarily make logical sense. So I think the fact that she couldn't make the stork just disappear was, sort of the sitcom reality that she's living in, that the stork will still be there. And yeah, I agree that the stork was hilarious. They kept it going to such hilarious extent. And also, having the stork, reach out and try to, grab the fish off Geraldine's pants, I thought was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Because, Geraldine just seemed to be dressed, in 70s appropriate garb. But the fact that she had these prominent fish and then to have the stork actually trying to get the fish off her pants, I thought was hilarious.
I agree. Yes. Okay, so it's fascinating. Some people online were saying, damn, they're introducing all these Young Avengers everywhere. And so they think that there will be a Young Avengers movie sooner rather than later, which might be kind of interesting to see.
They're bringing in Ironheart. They're bringing in these two. I'm pretty sure they're bringing in Viv the next episode. So that's another Young Avenger. They're bringing in Miss Marvel with her own series. So yeah,
They're bringing in America Sanchez. Is that her name? America Sanchez?
Yeah.
She's going to be in Captain Marvel too, as well. Yeah, so they are introducing a lot of these Young Avengers. So I would assume that there's a movie somewhere. I think there are rumors of Hulkling showing up somewhere. I think in Captain Marvel too, there are rumors. So we'll have to stay tuned. Speaking of staying tuned, let's talk about the commercial, Hydra Soak, Unleash the Goddess Within. What did we think of it? Was there anything that anyone noticed in it? I kept on looking around and I didn't really see anything.
I just wanted to say that I'm hoping it's a call out to S.H.I.E.L.D. because remember when Phil Coulson's stuck in the framework and he's like, I'm glad that I'm okay though because I don't use Hydra's blue mind control soap.
Oh yeah.
And they used mind control soap for the commercial and it's blue. So I was just kind of like, oh wow, that's cute. They could have made the Hydra mind control soap red or something like that or any other thing, but they made it blue. So I know that they can't actually like mention S.H.I.E.L.D. directly, but I thought it was a cute call.
Okay, that was interesting.
In the previous episodes, there were suggestions that the two characters in the commercials were Wanda's parents.
Yes, I mentioned that, yeah.
This episode, I think, challenges that because when you're watching the woman, she has two children, which are clearly not twins. And interestingly, are mixed race children.
Yes.
So that I would think argues against the idea that this is actually Wanda's parents. So I didn't get as much out of this, obviously, as I did out of the first episode's commercial.
Clearly.
But yeah, it feels to me like they're just sort of throwing these things in because it's a sitcom. It has to have commercials. So it felt to me a little more just, having a commercial for the sake of having commercial rather than, anything significant being hidden in there.
Okay. I do think that all the commercials have to deal with Wanda. So this was another Hydra commercial. I hope that the next commercial isn't Hydra, just because I feel like they're hitting us too much with the Hydra stuff. Although I guess it would be time period appropriate because Hydra would have been around in the 80s as well. I mean, they were always around. But I hope it's not Hydra focused, just because these previous two ones were. This one, I kept on looking around for clues. I didn't see any either. The gentleman that was kind of fanning her, I was like, was that the gentleman from the first two? And it didn't look like him. So it looked like it was just...
I thought it was him.
Okay, it didn't look like him to me, though.
I really thought it was him. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And I don't think they would have done the commercial unless both of them were going to appear in it.
Okay, because he looked a little bit younger than the gentleman that was in the previous two, but maybe it was him. We didn't really get a close-up look at him. He was just kind of like in the background fanning her. So maybe it was him. I did find it interesting that the children were mixed race. I thought that was incredibly progressive for the 70s. But clearly, I mean, the commercials are homages to the period in which whenever the sitcom is. It doesn't necessarily. They aren't necessarily maybe accurate as far as visual representation of the time period, because clearly we've seen a whole bunch of BIPOCs on the series period, and that would not have happened in like 50s, 60s, 70s and that sort of thing. So I did find that interesting, and I wondered if that was going to mean something. But it was a very kitschy 70s looking commercial. So let's talk about, let's talk about Geraldine in this episode. Because Geraldine was fascinating in this episode. I mean, Geraldine, in essence, portrayed the sitcom-y trope of the sassy black friend for a moment. But what she did, and I don't know if any of you noticed it, but she code switched in the middle of explaining, what was going on at work to Wanda. And I think Geraldine snapped out of it for half a second, and then she snapped back into it. Did we all notice this?
What do you mean code switch?
Well, she was in essence being the sassy black friend. She was talking very 70s. She had really embodied the sitcom role. And I'm not saying code switching because code switching does mean something different, but in essence, she snapped out of it, and then she was Monica Rambeau for a moment when the chittering happened. She was no longer speaking in like 70s slang and like a 70s vibe, and she wasn't the sassy black friend. She was...
Oh, okay.
She huh?
Yeah, I saw that too. And I thought to myself that, she heard something that as you say, she briefly snapped out of it. She was no longer sort of talking that 70s patois. She was, a contemporary character very briefly, and then something snapped her back into the 70s sassy black friend. But yeah, I saw that too, and I think that was intentional, and I think it was setting up what comes later in the episode.
Correct. And I think it was because Wanda sort of gave an explanation that kind of fit and made sense. And so she just, that sort of sucked her back into the sitcom world. Much like we saw it briefly, it wasn't, we didn't see her snap out of it verbally, but there was that look of confusion when she was introduced in episode 2, right before she was like, oh, I'm Geraldine. The funny thing is, after rewatching that second episode again, there was a line in there that I sort of took for granted, But after this episode, I was like, oh my God, that line was incredibly important. She was like, I don't know what I'm doing here in regards to the luncheon with the ladies. And then there was like the comedic line that Wanda says afterwards. She was like, I don't really know what I'm doing here either. But I was like, wow, that line was really important in that second episode.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. And it's one of those things that, when you get more information, you look back on the previous episodes and realize, oh, they were putting these little elements in there that will become more relevant as we go along.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you 100%. So, oh gosh, it's like, what direction do I want to go? Do I want to continue? What do we want to do? I'll give you all the choice. Do we want to continue with Geraldine, or do we want to get into that conversation with Agnes and Herb?
Because if we go into Geraldine, we gotta get into why she was kicked out.
I know, right?
And
I say
And if we go
Agnes and
into
Herb
Herb-
because,
Okay. All right, let's talk about Agnes and Herb. So, well, I should mention, so Wanda gives birth. She gives birth to twins. It was the one baby, but then in sort of kind of sitcom-y, type of thing, like, oh no, she's feeling the contractions again, and so she has twins, Tommy and Billy. The doctor says something really fascinating because earlier in the episode, they set it up with the doctor. He's going to be leaving town. He was going to be going to Bermuda, which I feel like is a very 70s destination. I feel like everyone in the 70s would always say that they're going to Bermuda for vacation and that sort of thing. But at the end of the episode, when Vision speed runs him to the house, although not that speedy because it took him forever. But when Vision, when the doctor's about to leave, Vision's like, oh, you can still make your trip. The doctor's like, no, sometimes, with, you know how it is in small towns, you sometimes can't escape. So the doctor had a little moment of, I don't know what we want to call it, awakening, self-realization, or that sort of thing. So we'll stick a pin in that because we'll discuss that in a moment as we sort of talk about this conversation between Agnes and Herb. So they're whispering about. Vision notices them. They quickly do the cheery sitcom thing, and they're whispering about. They're talking about, did you see her go in there? And the doctor was there. And did you see her belly? And what's going on? The closed captions are wonderful if y'all don't have them turned on because they helped figuring out exactly what they were talking about. And Vision's like, is everything okay? And Agnes is like, Geraldine's in there, right? And, is there anything, have you noticed anything about Geraldine? No family, no husband, no home. And it looks like Herb is ready to say something to Vision, and it looks like he's about to tell him. This is how I took it. I think Herb was about to tell him that we're all trapped. We're all trapped here. And Agnes is the one that looks at him, and she looks at him with concern. That's how I interpreted it. Like, please don't say anything. Like, please don't say anything. And Herb ends up not saying anything. Agnes, goes back to being sitcom-y. And when Vision sort of presses Herb once he's alone with him, Herb goes along and is sitcom-y as well. We've had discussions over the past 2 episodes of Agnes's role in the hierarchy of what's going on here. I know online I've read people thinking that Agnes is the one that's the big bad and that's behind everything. We've discussed here on the podcast that Agnes sort of seems to be in on stuff, but maybe she isn't necessarily behind this. How I took this conversation, I think Agnes is very cognizant of what's going on, but I also think Agnes is a little fearful of what's going on. And she didn't want Herb to say anything Maybe because Agnes tried to do something and she had her child turned into a rabbit. So she knows the consequences of messing around with what's going down. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching a little bit, but I think Agnes was a little scared. Although she was willing to kind of drop seeds for Vision, but I think she would have rather Vision have, picked up on it versus Herb flat out telling him. And maybe that's a little bit of her chaos, neutral chaos, positive nature that was coming out. I don't know. Professor, I know that you were the one that sort of was tiptoeing towards this earlier, so I'll ask you first. What did you think of what the doctor said, and what did you think of this conversation between Agnes, Herb, and Viz?
Well, I can't talk about this without jumping towards my end of episode prediction, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it at this point. We talked last episode, who is manipulating the Scarlet Witch? Is it AIM? Is it Mephisto? I think what I took away from this episode is that no one is manipulating her. She is doing this entirely on her own. She is the big bad of WandaVision. And she is doing this to the people. So, and we'll talk more about this, when we get to the end of the episode, when we get the revelations there. But I think what happened is that Wanda moved to this community, took it over, put a force field around it, and is forcing these people to live out, her sitcom fantasy of what her life would have been like, if the bad things in her life hadn't happened. I think what we're finding is that, whether it's because the Scarlet Witch is distracted by her pregnancy or what is going on, sometimes you're seeing that the people who are living there, Agnes, Dottie, and others, they have a certain awareness when she's not directly controlling them, and I think that's what we saw in this episode. We talked before about Monica Rambeau as being playing the character of Geraldine, and you mentioned that she had that moment where she broke free, and then later in the episode she's going to break free again. So I think what's happening is that Agnes and Hugh are realizing that, who is this Monica character? She's not part of the community. She clearly came in from the outside, and they're aware of that, though they can't, necessarily act on it. They don't have, full agency over what they're doing or what they're saying. They're, as Priscilla was saying, they're like, Sims characters, wandering around at the edge of the screen, but they're still at least somewhat aware of what's happening to them and somewhat aware of what they're doing. And for me, this was the moment in the episode where I realized, oh, yeah, no, this is entirely the Scarlet Witch is doing. I don't think she's being manipulated. I think she is doing this herself. And everything we've seen about, Sword trying to reach out to her and Randall Park on the radio trying to reach out to her, that's the people outside trying to reach into the Scarlet Witch because they don't realize she's the big bad. But for me, this was the scene where we realized that these are real people who are being controlled, sort of like a Twilight Zone episode or something like that, where, you have, someone who is controlling these people. And when you aren't exerting complete control over them, they have some agency, some awareness of what's happening to them. And to me, that's what struck me about that scene is that, these are two characters who, because they're not on camera at the moment, they think they can just talk amongst themselves, and then they realize they can't because they are being monitored. And so I really thought that was the moment in this, and that and the scenes coming up with Geraldine / Monica, where we'll look back on episode 3 as the episode where, in retrospect, this was when the show tipped its hand and said this is what is actually happening, even though it's not directly obvious in the episode. I think in future episodes, we'll look back and realize, they were planting the seeds. They were explaining exactly what's going to happen in the coming episodes. And I think the scene with Agnes was really important in that respect. The other interesting thing about that is that, when Agnes is talking about that, at the end of it, she has that sort of sitcom-y, she has that little joke and she rings the bell. And, ordinarily that would be, the sitcom laugh. There was no laugh there. And I think that's an indication that, the sitcom reality is breaking down somewhat. So I think that was like a really important scene with them sort of explaining to Vision what's happening. And, I think it's important that it was Agnes who was doing the explaining. Hugh wanted to say more, but she actually stopped him. And I think it's because, again, if we're assuming that that Agnes is Agatha Harkness or whomever, I think it's that she is more aware than the other characters of the reality that's happening to them. And she doesn't want to tip their hand. She doesn't want to tip Wanda off to what's happening, because if Wanda realizes that they're breaking free, if Wanda realizes that they have agency, she's going to clamp down on them all the more. So yeah, I thought that was a really, really, important scene. Also the end of it that, Agnes chose to leave the scene, whereas Hugh stuck around and, just sort of, snapped back into his character that he's playing in the sitcom. I think that shows that, Agnes is more aware than the other characters, and the fact that she chose to leave the scene rather than deal with that. But the way they were talking about Geraldine, we speculated before that because we know that Geraldine is actually Monica Rambeau, that she works for Sword, and we've speculated that she was inserted into this reality. Them sort of talking about she doesn't have a home, she's not from here. That makes a tremendous sense that they're the sort of non-player characters who are like, well, who is this person who has just inserted themselves into our community? So for me, I thought that scene was incredibly important, because I think it's tipping off where we're going forward.
Very interesting. All right. The professor gave us a very bold prediction. I will be asking for bold predictions at the end. So the professor already tipped his hat with his. Priscilla, I don't know if you want to give yours now too, if you want to wait. I'll be waiting for mine. I'll wait until the end. But Priscilla, what about you? What did you think of Agnes and Herb, as well as what the doctor said?
Okay, so with Agnes and Herb, I think that they are like Sims. They're stuck in this world. And I think we get the hint that there's more to her with her brooch, because her brooch, if you like zoom in on it, it's got like 3 figures on it, and one of them's got the scythe. And I think she's related to the Reaper. And either that, or I think it's the Maiden Mother Crone thing, and I think she's like it really is Agatha. But I'm not like I need a clearer picture to really see. I was like trying to squint on my Disney Plus on my laptop to figure it out, but I could not get a better resolution picture on mine.
Just an FYI, that brooch, she wore that in episode 2 as well.
Ooh. Maybe there's a better picture. But I was looking in episode 3. But I think that she's stuck there, and I think that she's being manipulated, but I think that the Scarlet Witch is being manipulated into creating this world through her grief by somebody else who's manipulating her into doing it. Like it's either Nightmare or somebody, but like somebody is using her to fuck with these people, and it's not cool.
Okay. Well, since Priscilla gave a bold prediction, I guess I'll give mine. I was trying to hold off. So I think that... Okay, see, here's the thing, and maybe it's the Gemini in me. I actually believe that either of your predictions is what's going to end up happening. It's either going to be the Scarlet Witch controlling everything and she'll be the big bad, which is not a bad idea at all, and I think would make complete sense. She sort of lets loose her powers. She doesn't necessarily like want to hurt the people, but unfortunately her powers go out of control, and in essence she is hurting the people. That would be really interesting, and I would not mind seeing that visually expressed. I do think that she's being manipulated though, and I think that's I'm more so leaning to that. So I do agree a little bit more with Priscilla. Like I think what we will end up seeing is that I don't know how she's gonna get there. I don't know if maybe this would be like an incredibly sort of like bold prediction that I would be making, but like let's say Sword, you know, found an anomaly and they asked Wanda to help because it looks like it's magic oriented or something. So she goes to Westview, she figures out what's going on, she even meets the person that's behind it. And let's say that person decides to give her a deal. I can make Vision come back. And, all you have to do is take dominion of, this area. And, she signs a contract. She does not read the details, and the devil's in the details. And in like the little the fine print, it says you have to give me your first two children or something like that. And maybe that's the predicament that she's in, but she doesn't know that she's in that predicament. Upon rewatching the second episode, upon rewatching the first two episodes, Wanda doesn't get the idea about having children until let's call her Agatha, until Agnes mentions it in the second episode. Like, because she talks about, she's, Dottie's in charge of, she'll get you into the proper schools, just in case. And Wanda's like, I don't think I'm ready for that. And then by the end of the episode, she's pregnant. For the children. So I think that's maybe where it could be going. Because I think that Wanda has fallen into a situation and she's taking advantage of the situation, but I think someone else is taking advantage of her powers and either needs the children or is feeding off of her powers and the chaos that she's brewing, potentially. But I do think also the series clearly needs to be a vessel to allow Wanda to grieve, because she needs to grieve Vision, she needs to grieve Pietro, which we'll be discussing in a moment, and either at the end of this, she's going to go full-on batshit crazy, or I'm going to need Wanda to be in a better place. If she goes full-on batshit crazy, that might be kind of interesting, based off of just stuff that I've heard from the comics. But yeah, so I'm leaning towards someone else being sort of the chaos agent in all of this. Now, whether it's Mephisto, whether it's the Grim Reaper, Nightmare, there was the character that I referenced in the previous week that I had no idea what how the name is pronounced, but it began with a CH. It's let me see, I wrote it down. It's Chthon. Does everyone know who he is? He's a Marvel. Chthon. Okay. Chthon. Yes. Chthon. That's someone that the internet was talking about. They were talking about Shuma Gorath as well. I don't know who that is. I don't know her, as Mariah Carey would say. So I don't know if it's Chthon or Shuma Gorath. Since we've already been getting hints of either the Grim Reaper or Mephisto, I would assume it might be one of them. I don't know.
From a storytelling point of view, I think it's much more interesting if she's not being manipulated by anyone, because, the idea of the powerful female being manipulated by someone in the shadows, I think is such a trope. I think if this was entirely the Scarlet Witch's doing, and to have a hero basically breaking bad, snapping, would be something that they've never really dealt with in the Marvel universe before. And so for me personally, I'm hoping that it's not someone manipulating her for that reason. I hope that it's her dealing with her grief, but dealing with it in a way that is hurting other people. And, you're dealing with, the rest of the Marvel universe having to deal with that. That's something we haven't dealt with in the MCU before. And I think it would be interesting. What happens when you have, these, sentient weapons, these beings of great power, when they're trying to do what they think is the right thing, but, not thinking about how that affects the rest of us. Personally, I think that's more interesting and a more nuanced storytelling thing than just having some, evil person or evil entity manipulating her. So that's kind of why I'm hoping that they're not going to take the now that the problem with that is that it means that you are basically writing off the Scarlet Witch. She can't, if she does this sort of stuff, and if she is doing this sort of stuff, then it makes it very, very difficult for her to have a road back to becoming a hero. But I think it's much more interesting if you sort of explore what happens when you are this incredibly powerful being who is more concerned with dealing with your problems than other people pose problems, which if I'm right about what's happening with the Scarlet Witch is what's happening in this reality. And personally, I think that's a more interesting storytelling choice. But again, I could be entirely wrong about that. But if I'm right, I think that's a really, really interesting thing. And it could be setting up the Scarlet Witch to be a big bad going forward.
No, I completely agree with you that it's a more interesting choice, but the only thing that knocks that theory out of the bound for me is the fact that when they're trying to communicate with the Scarlet Witch, they're like, "Are you there? Do you need help?" Like, they don't react to her like, "Hey, knock yourself out of this, get up, get out of this," like, or can you figure this out? Like, they act like she's a spy or something put in there to infiltrate something.
Except that that's exactly what they would do if they didn't realize she was the big bad, right? They would be reaching out to her saying, assuming that someone was doing this to her. Not that she was the person who was doing this herself. So I think it makes perfect sense if she, went up there and did that. Obviously, because she's a hero, everyone's going to assume, well, someone is doing this to her. But if that's not the case, I think the Randall Park, reaching out to her by the phone, sending in Monica Rambeau to find out what's happening on the ground from Sword. I think that makes perfect sense. If the Scarlet Witch has broken bad, and everyone's just assuming, well, she's a hero, she wouldn't do that.
Well, okay. So let's change one of the words that you were using, Professor, because you were saying maybe she's being, you hope that she isn't being manipulated by a big bad and this and the other. What if she isn't being manipulated by the big bad? What if there is a big bad, but they're taking advantage of the chaos that she's sown? So it's not that he manipulated, or they, whomever it is, it's not that they manipulated her, but like, let's say, they because they're also a magic being, they feel the energy and they see what's going on. And so they end up taking advantage of what Wanda has created so that they can achieve whatever goal they have to achieve.
Entirely possible and completely acceptable. I just don't think there's been anything in the show so far that supports that. I think the simpler explanation is that the Scarlet Witch has snapped and is manipulating reality for her own personal selfish reasons. We haven't gotten any real indication. And again, that could just be the episodic storytelling that we're dealing with. But, we're 3 episodes into it, and I think it's supposed to be a 9-episode run, which means we're a third of the way through. And, there's been no indication of the big bad yet. That leads me to suspect the simpler explanation is that there is no big bad. The big bad is right in front of us all the time.
Okay. I like it. I'm here for all of it. I'm here for interesting, fascinating, mysterious storytelling, which is what we've gotten so far. So I'm cool with all of it. I'm just along for the ride, and I'm enjoying hearing everyone's theories on what's to come. It's funny how we're talking about theories, but we haven't even finished with the episode. So let's continue on, because something big happens. When various websites were talking about the series and giving their previews and talking about the episodes they had seen, they mentioned that they got the first 3 episodes, and they said that at the end of the 3rd episode, it was a game changer. There are talks of episode 4 being a game changer as well, so I feel like we're going to be changing the game from here on out every time that we talk about WandaVision. But this one certainly did change the game big time. As the professor also stated, he said that this would be the episode, he feels that this could be the episode that we will look back on and be like, wow, this one gave us a whole bunch of more information than we thought we had. So while Vision is having his discussion with Herb and Agnes, Geraldine is inside with Wanda. Now, I will say, before anything happened, as I was watching Geraldine having to deal with Wanda's birth, not Wanda's birth, but Wanda giving birth, and seeing everything that was going on in that house, I was like, they're going to have to do something to her, because she has seen too much, and that's not going to be able to be explained away as easily. At least that's what I thought. So Wanda is with Geraldine. She's looking at the babies. The babies are twins. And she tells Geraldine, I will say, this was Wanda not in a sitcom-y voice. It was in her own MCU voice. I was a twin. And she's like, I had a twin. His name is Pietro. And that snaps Geraldine out of her sitcom-y twang. And she's like, yeah, he was killed by Ultron, wasn't he? And this starts to snap Wanda out of everything even more. And she's like, what did you say? And Geraldine snaps back into her sitcom-y twang. She's like, oh, you're a strong woman. And they go back and forth. Geraldine sort of snaps out of it for a moment as well. There's a confrontation. Wanda's like, who are you? And Geraldine goes, I don't... And she starts questioning her. And then we don't see what happens. We continue on with Agnes, Herb, and Vision. Vision goes inside the house. He's like, where's Geraldine? And I don't know what I want to call her. It's not really apoplectic, but a menacing-looking Wanda sort of steely says, oh, she went home, this, that, or the other, and she just has this intense look on her face, is what I will call it. We see the aspect ratio of the screen changes as we see Geraldine get thrown out of Westview, what appears to be through some sort of magical membrane type of thing. And she lands outside of Westview at night. Westview, it's daytime. And she's in her 70s garb, and sword surrounds her. I will also say that she does have a sword necklace on with the logo, and Wanda was questioning her about that as well. So, what do we think of this? What the hell? Did we all notice them going in and out of the sitcom world as far as their dialect? Wanda does a whole Sokovian lullaby. What the hell was this? And did we love every moment of it? Or at least did y'all love every moment of it? Because I loved every moment of it. I will say when I saw this the first time, I rewound the fuck out of this scene just to watch it over and over and over again. Because it was so good. Priscilla?
Holy shit. Wanda went bad. If I had any inkling that she wasn't controlling this before, the fact that her face just went ham, it just went ape, it just went bad when she heard, your brother was killed by Ultron, wasn't he? She just lost it, and she's like, "You're ruining my happy home," and just pushed her out of there. Like, you're not allowed here if you're not gonna play nice. If you're not gonna play by my rules, I don't want you here.
Yeah,
Is
you're not supposed
basically
to say
what
the
she
U
did.
word. You're not supposed to say the U word. And it wasn't really until this moment in the Maximoff sort of history that I realized she hasn't mentioned Pietro since Age of Ultron. And I didn't really notice that because remember I mentioned that I sort of binged a whole bunch of, in particular, just of the more recent MCU stuff, and a lot of that included Wanda and Vision. And it's true, like she didn't mention Pietro in Civil War. She didn't mention him in Endgame or Infinity War. So this was the first time his name was mentioned, and it was the first time we've seen her really react to it.
Something else about that is that something I noticed in this episode is, when did Vision develop speed powers?
Vision always had speed powers, didn't
No, he
Like,
didn't. No, Vision
Couldn't
had
he
never
speed
had super
fly?
speed.
Oh, he had
He could
flight.
fly. He had density control. He could fire beams out of the gem. He never had super speed before this episode.
Are you sure? Didn't he
And
fly fast?
he could fly very fast. And, if you go back to the first episode when she says you can travel at Mach 1, I just assumed she was talking about him flying. But if you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Vision never had super speed. In this episode, he has super speed. Why? And is it a coincidence that this is the episode where they bring up Pietro? That can't be a coincidence.
That's interesting.
I think this is another manifestation of Wanda creating a reality. And getting back to my idea that, if Wanda is the big bad, so, she's doing this to protect her reality with Vision. She now has children. Can you imagine how dangerous she'll be if she's protecting these children? Because if someone tries to break in and change this reality, she might lose her children. How dangerous would she be if she's protecting the kids?
Mm-hmm. For the children.
For the children.
That's interesting. What did we think of, well, Professor, I want to get your take on everything as well. So before I ask him the next question, what did you think of just everything Wanda and Geraldine?
Boy, that was so good. I mean, the actress playing Geraldine / Monica was so good. We saw it earlier, as you mentioned, when we have the stork skittering around and she briefly breaks free. She hears the sound and she plays that sense of disorientation really, really well, which I think sets up what happens later. Because, there's two ways of looking at that scene between Geraldine and Wanda, which is, one is that Geraldine is, aware of everything and, is taking advantage of that moment to bring up Pietro to try to break through to Wanda or manipulate her in some way. But really, I think, the actress played her just as someone who was, sort of coming up out of a dream. And I think the idea is that, Wanda was distracted. Wanda was, staring at her children. She was singing that lullaby. And so her control slipped very briefly. And that allowed Monica to partially break out of it. Not break out of it as in, oh my God, I'm in danger here. But, she's seeing, she's, start having this memory coming up. Oh yeah, your brother, didn't he get killed by Ultron? Which is, a logical thing to say in that moment. And I think it was really, really well played by both of them. And I think at that moment, the Scarlet Witch, being reminded of that outside reality, and the anger that you saw in her. And as you say, the fact that she, her voice changed, her whole demeanor changed tremendously. I think that was her, reasserting control and getting rid of Geraldine for that reason. I was going to jump ahead to something I was saying might happen in the next episodes, but I'll shut up about that.
All right. I do want to hear that in a little bit, so I will remember to ask you about that. That whole scene was just fantastic. It was incredibly intense. The acting was so good. Elizabeth Olsen did a really good job of going from, happy, cheery sitcom voice to Wanda's MCU voice to giving us a little bit of the Sokovian accent, especially when she said Pietro's name and then singing in Sokovian. I thought Tiana Paris did a really good job of because I think she did snap out when she asked about Ultron, and I think she snapped out in such a way that she asked, and I think she realized she oopsed for a moment there. And then later on when she's like, "Don't be like that, Wanda," or something like that. That when she said that, it made me wonder if they had a relationship before this. Like, cause that was also her snapping out, I think, cause she wasn't talking when she was like, "Don't be like that, Wanda." She didn't do that in like her 70s sitcom voice. She said that sort of matter of fact. And I thought that was interesting as well. I wonder what the necklace means outside of it being the sword logo. Was that supposed to be like a totem that was in essence going to help her remember, or going to maybe tether her to the quote unquote real world? I don't know, but it was fascinating that she was wearing the sword logo as a necklace, because if she's supposed to be undercover, that's that was a little too glaringly obvious. In the second episode, she wasn't wearing it. So,
but isn't that sort of a 70s thing
mhm.
where like the bad guys always have like their insignia on their chest or on their
How dare
logos and stuff like
you?
that?
How dare you call her the bad guy?
No, because that be like for Wanda, wouldn't that be her bad guy?
True
The person
dat.
who wants to break her idyllic world?
True dat. Yeah, that's true.
So a person who's got like the insignia on the chest of like this organization that's trying to break up her happy-go-lucky world of mothers and fathers and babies and just ruin it is the enemy.
True. Something that I noticed when I was watching this one, because I did see a bunch of the WandaVision trailers, as the series was getting ready to premiere. A lot of them were very similar, so they didn't really give that much new footage with each subsequent trailer. But because they used the same footage throughout, these trailers, I remembered certain scenes. And in a lot of the trailers, when Wanda asks, "Who are you?" Geraldine goes, "I don't know." And then she has like a weird look on her face, and then so does Wanda, and then there's like a hard cut, and then they're both smiling. So I wonder if we're going to get a different perspective on this, because in one of the trailers it shows a little bit more of her being pushed out of that reality, her being Monica Rambeau, aka Geraldine. So I wonder if we might end up seeing at some point a different cut of this, where we see this from Geraldine's perspective of like how she got kicked out of this world, which would be a little different than what we've seen thus far, because we haven't seen the perspective of the outside world. I have no idea how they would do that, because so far everything has been sitcom-y. In essence, it's framed within the sitcom. We did get a tease of the outside world, so I guess maybe an episode could start off in the outside world, and then the aspect ratio changes, and then we see the sitcom, and maybe there's like outside world bookends to an episode. I don't know what they're going to do to switch things up, but I think we're going to get more footage of Geraldine and her journey and how she was really kicked out.
Yeah, I agree. I was talking about, my sort of, vague predictions for the future. And I think that might be a way they would go. The first three episodes were entirely within the sitcom world, except for, at the very end. I'm wondering whether going forward, if we're, more establishing, the idea of the Scarlet Witch as being either the big bad or, the cause of all of this, whether we might cut between the sitcom world and the outside world, whether bookending or even within the episode. To cut away to the sword agents. We know Kat Dennings is coming back. We haven't seen her in the series so far, so she's presumably on the outside. So if we're going to have these outside characters, I think we have to see what's happening in the outside world of the people trying to break through to whatever's happening with Scarlet Witch and Vision in that reality. So I think it's entirely possible that maybe starting from episode 4 going forward, maybe we're going to be seeing more of what is happening on the outside. Who are the sword people? Who is the person in the beekeeper suit? All of that I think is a way to change things up rather than sticking rigidly to the interior sitcom structure that we've had up to this point.
I would not be surprised if we actually had already seen Darcy. I'm like 99% sure that was her watching them on the monitor in episode 1.
Well, that doesn't count if all you see is
I know.
Control.
But I think
Kat Dennings, damn it.
I know. But I think that was her character, and I think we're gonna learn that once she actually shows up and we can see her. I think it's gonna be her kind of monitoring them and looking for clues as to maybe Sword trying to figure out like what exactly is going on. All we know for certain is next week is the 80s episode. I mean, we're traveling through the decades, so this was the 70s. Next week will be the 80s. And I'm just going to say this now, and I do not want to be disappointed, Marvel. If you do not have Elizabeth Olsen say, "You got it, dude," as one of her lines in the 80s week episode, I am going to be so fucking pissed off. She's got to say, "You got it, dude." Please, I'm begging. I hope that they actually wrote that in for her. Yes, I feel like the professor has no idea why I'm saying this.
I don't know if she's got to say, "You got it, dude," because aren't they saying that they're gonna be talking about Married with Children, and in that one I don't know.
Well, no. Did they say the 80s would Married with Children? I think 90s would be Married with Children.
Oh, shit. So we're not going to
that's good.
You're right.
I'm glad you actually said that because I kept on wondering. So I was like, okay, 80s will probably be Full House. And I kept on wondering, what would be 90s? Because it seems like they are sticking to family-style sitcoms. And 90s would probably be Married with Children.
Yeah.
And then it depends on if they do like the early aughts versus like the 2010s separately. I kind of feel like they're not going to do like 2000s and then 2010s. I feel like it's just going to be aughts. And based off of a trailer, it looks like it's going to be Modern Family.
Yeah. They said Malcolm in the Middle too for another.
Oh, maybe that's going to be 90s then.
Yeah.
Because Malcolm in the Middle, was that 90s or was that early 2000s?
Yeah, I think that was 90s.
I think that was early 2000 now that I'm thinking about it. So would they do that? So then they would do, in essence, Full House, Married with Children, Malcolm in the Middle, and then Modern Family?
Mm-hmm.
That seems like a lot.
I don't know. Maybe it's like a pastiche, kind of like how this one was like Modern Family, not Modern Family, Partridge Family,
Brady Bunch. Yeah.
Brady Bunch.
Okay, then that would work for me too. Yeah, because I feel like we need to get to a point to where there's no more sitcom left,
Mm-hmm.
But I could see them milking that so that the final 3 episodes would be no longer sitcom and it would be all action, for lack of a better word.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Sure.
Do you think Pietro's going to come out?
Yes.
But her Pietro or I
know where you're going.
Pietro?
Oh, based off of rumors, some people seem to think Evan Peters is going to be on the show.
Yeah.
And based off of something I read on Twitter, I kind of think he is, but my hope is if they do bring on Evan Peters and he's playing Pietro, my hope is that Wanda realizes this isn't her Pietro. You know what I'm saying? Like, if they are going to do that, in essence, it would be stunt casting. She would have to realize that it's not him. And then that's probably when all hell is going to fucking break loose. So that would probably happen in the Modern Family episode.
Ooh, I like this. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Because there are other rumors. I don't really even, because they're just rumors, because there are rumors that he's playing someone else as well. So I don't know what to believe. There is no concrete information about anything. Something that we didn't discuss is just a quick little throwaway, because we saw Dottie for a second, and apparently she's married to Phil.
Yeah, I found that quite surprising.
Yeah, so it was hella random.
It was also kind of interesting because, last episode, Dottie was presented, almost as this, malign force to just sort of throw her in. It's almost like, they didn't want to do what they did with Deborah Jo Rupp of not revisiting the character at all, just sort of reminding us that she's still out there, going forward. But yeah, it did seem, and now it was just used in the standard sitcom, humorous trope. But yeah, I think it was, kind of important to remind us that she's still out there, because we really didn't get a lot of the external characters in this episode. The Doctor, who was new, but really just the other two were significant in the episode, which was kind of interesting too, because in the previous episodes it was much more about them interacting with people. This was almost a bottle episode, which was just Vision and the Scarlet Witch with a couple of people drifting around the outside.
Yeah. Deborah Jo Rupp was at the talent show, though, in episode 2.
Yes, she was.
Yeah. So she was around. She just wasn't the focus, in essence. Okay. So I feel like we covered everything. So did I miss anything? Even something teeny tiny before we head into the MVP? Okay. You got it, dude. I need a you got it, dude. Please.
You got it, dude.
Okay, not from you, but I did like it. I need it. I need it in my life. I just, because it would be an Olsen saying it. Like, it's perfect. I hope that they realized how perfect it would be. Anyway, you watch, in a week I'm going to be like, fuck, why didn't they say you got it, dude? Anyway, even if Vision said it, someone needs to say you got it, dude. That's all I need. Anyway, MVP, the most valuable player. State which character impressed you throughout the episode and why. Once a character has been chosen, they cannot be selected again, so choose wisely. Let's see. Professor, who's your MVP?
Well, I am tempted to give it to Stork, who did an absolutely fantastic job. I'm going to give it to Geraldine. She was really, really good. We talked about, as you said, the code switching. It was very subtle. She did it a couple of times. That moment where she was hearing the sound and briefly broke free, and I thought, she played it very, very well. And then, the scene with the Scarlet Witch, and also because, for me, that scene where the Scarlet Witch, that's where, I became absolutely convinced that she is the big bad. Not big bad but big bad in the antagonist of the series. And it's going to be about the other characters, Vision and the NPCs, trying to figure out how to break her free or break free from her control. And so I think that was really good. And, even though she's technically out of the sitcom reality, I do hope that we're seeing more of the outside world, just that we get more of Geraldine / Monica Rambeau going forward.
All right, a very good choice. Priscilla, your MVP and why?
I think my MVP is going to be Vision, because I loved how he cribbed off of Wanda and how he supported her throughout the entire episode, and how he kind of pulled off that whole I want to be a good dad, but I don't know what the hell I'm doing. One of my favorite scenes, and it's like a really like small scene, was, and it's been done so many times in so many sitcoms, but I love it in this one, is when everything's going haywire and he's like, oh my god, did your water just break, he who, and he starts flying up in the air, and she's telling him to breathe, and he starts calming down and going down and floating down. He's like, thank you, as she's the one that's going through the contractions, and I thought that was really cute. So yeah, Vision for sure.
Another good choice, and it frees up a character that I can pick for the MVP. I'm giving it to Wanda. Elizabeth Olsen was just spectacular throughout the entire episode. From all of the sitcom-y comedy, the butterflies coming to life, and her sort of surprise that happened. That the moment where everything was going haywire in the kitchen, and then they escape the kitchen, and then the lights sort of go really bright, and then she's doing like these almost like karate hands, like if that was gonna do anything. I thought that was brilliant, and then it just turned dark and twisty when she was with Geraldine. She played it brilliantly. The almost apoplectic look on her face at the end, it just was fantastic. And if this was sort of a taste of a menacing Wanda that we might see in the future, I'm here for it. I'm excited for it. The professor actually triggered a question that I'm going to ask you right now before we rate the episode. Do we think at the end of this all, a bold prediction time, Vision will be brought back in some way, shape, or form? Yes, no?
No. Just
Ooh.
because I think if Vision was brought back, if they do bring Vision back, if they brought him back as like a total robot, okay. But otherwise, you're basically giving Scarlet Witch the happy ending when she's, as I said, I think she's the big bad. And I don't think you get the happy ending if you're the big bad. So if they do bring him back, you'd have to be like a completely mind-wiped Vision. But I think it's more likely that he's not going to come back.
All right. Priscilla, what do you think?
Okay, I have a spoiler alert, but it's just from a clip that I saw in one of the ads, and it was of Wanda creating a Mind Stone from a ball of yellow gas. So if that's the case, then I think that Vision's coming back.
Oh, that's interesting. I do remember seeing that, but I wasn't sure what the hell she was doing. Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. Okay. Let's just put it out there. That was Priscilla's interpretation of something, a visual that she saw in the trailer. We're not sure if that's going to happen, but that's fascinating. I do think he's going to return. I don't know in what shape or form, because in the comics, he has returned. He's been a gray husk in essence. There's a character where they have his mind waves or something, and they're able to bring Vision back. I don't believe they've introduced the character at all in the MCU, so maybe that's not what they're going to do. But I hope they bring him back. If we really think about it, Paul Bettany has been a part of the MCU since the beginning. So it would be nice for him to continue on in some way, shape, or form. All right, let's rate the episode. How would you rate this episode on a scale of 1 to 10 televisions? The point system is allowed, and if you found the episode exceptional, deserving of more than a 10, you may grant it the coveted golden television. Let's start off with Priscilla.
Okay, I'm gonna give this one, as much as I really loved the scene with Monica Rambeau and Wanda facing off, the rest of the episode left me kind of wondering when this TV thing is going to be over pretty soon, because I was just not in the mood for 70s television today. So I'm going to give it a 7.
All right, a 7 for the 70s, I guess. Right, Priscilla?
Yup.
Okay, so Priscilla's giving it a 7. Professor, what about you? Where do you stand?
I'm going to give it a 9.5. I thought it was very enjoyable. And as I say, I think it was a significant episode for reasons that we'll only appreciate going forward. So I think we'll look back on this one and realize there was a lot in here that will only become really obvious going forward. But looking back on it, I think we'll realize this was a more important episode. But even just leaving that aside, it was really, really enjoyable. I thought all the acting was great, and really, focusing as they did on Vision and the Scarlet Witch, it gave those two characters, they really carried it well. So I found it really, really enjoyable.
And I'm going to agree with the professor. I'm going to give it a 9.5 as well. I kind of understand where Priscilla's coming from because, in essence, for me, this isn't really the type of 70s sitcom comedies that I like. The family style, sort of cheesy, goofy, Brady Bunch, Partridge Family sitcoms is not my cup of tea. But their homage to it was just so perfectly done that I found it incredibly enjoyable. And the twists and turns that we got, because we got a lot of it in this episode, everyone was glitching. All of that was really interesting. And even though we did not get a lot of Agnes, who's become one of my favorite characters on the show, we got just enough to sort of whet our appetite and to really give us, it wasn't just a breadcrumb. It was like a pound cake of just, of juicy stuff that we could ponder over for a podcast. So this was a really good episode, a game changer, and it really made me excited to see what the next episode was going to be about, because I feel like after this episode, anything can happen, and they can veer in any different direction. We can see more of the outside world. We could focus on the stuff going on in Westview. It was all really, really good. So on that note, join us next time for a brand new installment of the Avengers Initiative WandaVision. Here's our announcer to remind you on how you can interact with us.
Follow Poppy Chulo Radio on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Poppy Chulo Radio. Do you have any questions, suggestions, comments, or concerns? Email us via contact@poppychuloradio.com. Are you interested in joining the Poppy Chulo Radio team as an on-air personality? Email talent@poppychuloradio.com. Binge listen to your favorite Poppy Chulo Radio programs by visiting poppychuloradio.com/archives. You can also download tonight's broadcast and the rest of the series through Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Just search for The Avengers Initiative, WandaVision, and subscribe.
Thanks, announcer. My co-hosts, please wish the listeners a good night, starting off with the professor.
Good night, everyone.
And Priscilla.
Good night, everybody. I hope
Thanks.
you planned your vacations out well and you actually get to take them.
Let's go to Bermuda. Thanks for tuning in. Download the new episodes of The Avengers Initiative, WandaVision, every Tuesday via Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and the Poppy Chulo Radio archives. Good night.